Mark my words, Qatar told Hamas to keep the hostages. The lie that Israel is trying to deliberately starve the people of Gaza is one of the most malicious lies we've heard in this war.
5 a.m. this morning, 120 trucks loaded with life-saving food and medicine crossed into Gaza at the Kerem Shalom border crossing, courtesy of the United Nations. By noon, those very same bags of flour and rice that were clearly marked with the United Nations labels were being sold at triple their price in the markets of Gaza. And who profits? Hamas. Who suffers, you're asking? The ordinary Gazan Palestinian people. Yet hours later, Al Jazeera reported that Israel is starving Gaza. And by evening, the United Nations echoed these false accusations, setting off diplomatic shockwaves around the world. London and Paris suddenly announced recognition of a Palestinian state, a move that United States Senator Marco Rubio called a gift to Hamas and to terror worldwide. Today, we'll uncover exactly how Hamas hijacks humanitarian aid to fuel their propaganda machine, how the United Nations is complicit, and why the stakes are higher than ever for Israel on the world stage. Plus, we'll meet a man who's dedicated his life to fighting these lies, former Israeli spokesperson Eylon Levy. But first, please like, share, and subscribe, and help us spread the truth of what's happening in Israel. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is My State, a program about current events, my belief in God, and my journey in the Holy Land. And today, I'm coming to you from Tel Aviv. This is Ben Gurion. We're on the front lines of a battle for truth, and we need your help. Support our fight by donating to tbn.org/standwithisrael. Every contribution strengthens our mission to broadcast the facts of what's happening in Israel. So guys, if you want to join our campaign, go to tbn.org/standwithisrael. Just miles away, the truth is being twisted and weaponized against Israel. The pattern is disturbingly familiar. Aid trucks enter Gaza, Hamas intercepts them, seizing supplies and selling them at super high prices back to the people. These stolen goods then appear on marketplaces and street corners, enriching Hamas commanders while ordinary Gazans remain hungry. Meanwhile, carefully orchestrated photos and videos of empty shelves are broadcasted worldwide by outlets like Al Jazeera, falsely blaming Israel. The United Nations knows exactly what's happening. Internal UNRWA documents leaked to Israel and to the Channel 13 News confirm that aid is being diverted systematically by Hamas. Yet, the United Nations remains silent publicly, afraid to confront Hamas directly. Instead, they amplify misinformation, accusing Israel of causing humanitarian suffering. This false narrative has profound diplomatic consequences. The United Kingdom and France said that they will recognize a Palestinian state based on misinformation spread by media and by activists. Senator Rubio condemned this, declaring it rewards terrorism and undermines genuine peace efforts in this region. This move by Europe has further isolated Israel diplomatically, complicating the United States' efforts to mediate a fair and balanced solution in this region. The truth is clear: aid is plentiful and regularly delivered by Israel. The blockade is against weapons and against terrorism, not food and medicine. To truly understand the global impact of these lies, I'm meeting with Eylon Levy, Israel's former government spokesperson turned global truth warrior. Eylon is now flying to universities, media outlets, and diplomatic gatherings across Latin America, Europe, the United States, and fighting misinformation in multiple languages. The goal is to dismantle anti-Israel propaganda once and for all. So Eylon, It's great to be here with you.
Hello. Always great to be sitting in a shaded boulevard in Tel Aviv.
A lot nicer than last time we met entering the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, not much shade inside the Gaza Strip, and Tel Aviv is much more beautiful.
Definitely. So can you please explain to our audience, like, who are you, what do you do, and what front are you fighting for Israel?
My name is Eylon Levy. For the first 5 months or so of the October 7th war, I was an official government spokesman. I had nothing to do with the government before the war started, but October 7th and the Hamas massacre changed everything, and Israeli society did something amazing. Everyone came together and asked what they can do to help the country. In a very strange twist of events, I found myself in the Prime Minister's office being shoved in front of the cameras to explain our country as it found itself fighting a war on 7 fronts. And since then, I've been leading a media campaign to shore up support for Israel around the world, to fight against the campaign of misinformation and propaganda that is being waged by Hamas and its supporters.
Who is funding this campaign?
The anti-Israel campaign has been astonishingly successful. And Hamas has been very effective at manipulating audiences in the West to try to get pressure that will save it from the war that it started. Just think about the way that Hamas designed the Gaza Strip, a network of military tunnels longer than the New York subway, with tunnel shafts poking out inside homes and schools and mosques and hospitals, and they booby-trap tens, if not hundreds of thousands of buildings, their soldiers fighting in civilian clothes from within crowds of women and children, and of course stealing and diverting vast quantities of international aid. Hamas designed a battlefield that gave Israel a choice. If Israel attacks Hamas terrorists, Israel will be condemned because people will be hurt and it looks terrible and people are right to be upset about what is happening. Or Israel can leave Hamas alone and Hamas gains permanent immunity by violating international law. The goals are to prevent Hamas from rebuilding its army so it can invade again and to bring the hostages back.
So let's start breaking down and giving answers to the questions that we are receiving from people around the world. Number one, is Israel shooting innocent civilians that are wanting to receive aid at the GHF aid distribution centers?
Israel targets Hamas terrorists. There have been very serious crowd control issues around the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's distributed around 100 million meals directly to civilians at a time that the UN has been failing to pick up aid, and there have been cases where soldiers have opened fire because they feared that their lives were at risk. The reason that Israel has set up this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation system is to try to square an impossible circle. How do you get aid to people who need it and bypass the system that Hamas has been able to loot and commandeer and take advantage of?
So Hamas doesn't like that?
No, Hamas doesn't like it. And Hamas and the UN agencies that want to keep a monopoly on the aid distribution system have every interest to disrupt the GHF and go back to a system that they can loot in order to stuff their own coffers and arm their war machine.
Is the IDF deliberately starving the Gazan population?
No, the lie that Israel is trying to deliberately starve the people of Gaza is one of the most malicious lies we've heard in this war. The fact is that Israel has facilitated into Gaza nearly 1.9 million tons of aid, nearly 100,000 trucks since the start of the war. No example of one side to a war allowing so much food, so many supplies to be delivered into enemy-held territory while the enemy is still fighting, while the enemy is still taxing supplies, while the enemy is still holding hostages. No example in history of that. It's not to deny for a moment that there is serious and widespread hunger in the Gaza Strip. The humanitarian situation in Gaza cannot improve until there is a ceasefire, which Hamas is refusing. The whole world is now coming around to accepting Israel's basic war goals.
Is there a chance for a two-state solution, and is there still an option to end this war?
The root cause of this conflict is that Israel wants to exist and its enemies don't want it to exist. The West Bank is a large mountain range that overlooks Tel Aviv and surrounds Jerusalem. And if the West Bank were taken over by terrorists like Hamas, Hamas would be able to use that as a launch pad for further attacks against Israel. So many countries are rewarding Hamas for the October 7th massacre. And so the push now to recognize a Palestinian state that doesn't exist, right? These countries want a Palestinian state to exist. You can't recognize something that doesn't exist, okay? Is encouraging Hamas to continue its terrorism against Israelis. But the pathway to peace is towards getting the Palestinians to realize that their century-long battle against any Jewish state in any borders whatsoever is over. But I think the Palestinians, their leaders, have done a very good job of convincing Israelis that their goal is not a state next to Israel, it's a state instead of Israel. And as long as that remains the aspiration of the Palestinian movement, to destroy Israel from the river to the sea behind us, and not to live in peace next to it, then no, it's not possible to have peace, and a Palestinian state would only exacerbate the conflict.
Why is it taking so long for the IDF to destroy the Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza after we defeated Iran in only 12 days, Hezbollah in a very short period of time?
The war in Gaza is dragging on because the Hamas regime that started this war is still holding on to 50 hostages it refuses to release, and because it refuses to lay down its arms. You have to bring Hamas down, and you have to bring the hostages home. And the cost for civilians in Gaza has plainly been horrendous. And I think people are right to be upset by that. But they should point the finger of blame at the Hamas regime that refuses to surrender or even pause the war. Even pause the war in order to release the hostages. The October 7th massacre was the opening shot of the Iranian Axis's regional war against Israel. Hamas is different because it's not just a terrorist organization, it's a terrorist regime. Hamas designed a gritty urban battlefield where Israel is now fighting against a guerrilla force. And what we need is international pressure on Hamas, not on Israel.
And what would you say to our viewers? We have millions of viewers around the world that are standing with Israel and want to help. But it seems like we're outgunned in the war for sharing the truth. But what would you say to them? How can they be part of fighting with Israel in this war?
There are 50 hostages who are trapped in Gaza right now. At least 20 of them are alive. They're being held in inhumane conditions. They're being starved. They're being tortured. They're being abused. They're sitting there shackled and chained with untreated injuries all the way from October 7th, and they need to get home to their families. It's not about politics. It's a basic humanitarian cause to free the hostages who are stuck in the dungeons of Gaza, and Israel cannot stop fighting until all of those hostages are free. So anyone who wants to support Israel from afar, many people have forgotten about the hostages. Many people are working very hard to make sure that people forget about the hostages. Don't let them. Keep sharing their stories, keep sharing their faces, and keep reminding people why Israelis, the soldiers on the ground, are fighting to get their brothers and sisters and friends out of those torture dungeons under Gaza.
Guys, if you want to know more about what's happening in Israel, you can follow Eylon Levy on social media platforms.
Follow on social media. I'm on X and Instagram and TikTok. Eylon A Levy, E-Y-L-O-N, A Levy with a Y. Follow for more on the ground.
Definitely. And guys, if you haven't subscribed to TBN Israel, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and we will keep updating you every day from Israel. Is the Gaza war the biggest war going on around the world? Because if you open the news, that's what you think.
Yes, sometimes you can forget that Russia is waging an illegal war of aggression against Ukraine, using a lot of Iranian weapons, by the way, threatening to wipe a sovereign, independent country off the map and take Russian troops all the way to the border of Poland and the rest of Eastern Europe.
Pretty big.
It's
pretty big.
easy to forget about the mass disasters taking place in Sudan, across Africa. I think the reason that people care so much about this war is because they're fighting their own culture wars within their own countries.
We see that the Hamas terrorist organization is Sunni, like a sect in Islam, but the Iranians are Shiites. But somehow, like all over the Middle East, they are fighting each other, like brutal fights. But then when it comes to Israel, they're uniting, they're supporting them, and they are trying to assist them in destroying Israel. Why is that? Where does the hatred against Israel comes from?
I think across the Muslim world, Israel is seen as an affront to Islam. How is it possible that they were able to rise up and claim their own independence and keep proving the inferiority and backwardness of the Arab world. They see it as an offense against their religion, the fact that Israel exists, not something Israel does, the fact that it exists, the fact that in the heart of the Muslim world is a little country that refuses to be under the domination of Islam. And so that brings together movements like Hamas and the Islamic regime of Iran, which both have an interest in the destruction of the state of Israel. And we need to be clear, their goal is the destruction of the state of Israel because of deep religious conviction that a Jewish state is not something that should exist in a realm that should be under the exclusive control of Islam.
What's the end game for Qatar? What do they want to achieve here?
Mark my words, Qatar told Hamas to keep the hostages. Qatar never condemned Hamas for taking the hostages, never told Hamas it has to release them. Instead, Qatar has been saying since day one it's pushing for a ransom, a deal that would leave Hamas in power free to take more hostages. That's what Qatar was pushing for from day one. Qatar is a subversive actor. It's a country of not many people with vast amounts of gas wealth, but they don't know what to spend on. And they're spending it buying influence in the United States. The Qataris have spent over $100 million buying influence in the United States, universities, think tanks, snapping them up, spending vast sums of money buying influence in the United States. Because Qatar is a Muslim Brotherhood country, and its leaders are committed to a vision of radical Islam that is a danger to the West. And Hamas is their client. Qatar is one of Hamas's patrons. Hamas's leaders live in Doha. It is unconscionable that Qatar has not arrested them and handed them over to the United States to face trial for crimes against humanity. And that's what the United States needs to demand. Qatar has to decide, does it want to be a major non-NATO ally or a state sponsor of terror? Does it want Hamas or the United States? You have to choose. You can't have both.
We are tiny. Can you maybe explain what a colonialistic state is and what Israel is to the viewers? I don't think they understand.
Look, if you need to understand the extent of British colonialism, ask how many people around the world speak English. Spanish colonialism, how many countries around the world speak Spanish? The same for French, the same for Portuguese. How many countries around the world speak Hebrew? Barely one. You look at the map.
Not very well.
You look at the map, I saw one comedian who said, Israel is so small, you have to zoom in to see it, and then you have to zoom in even more to see the name Israel because it doesn't fit in the country itself. The fact is, Israel is the Jewish homeland, and it's where the Jewish people returned after 2,000 years of exile. You know, we're filming this. Just today, the Israel Antiquities Authority published the discovery of a new coin that was discovered in the shadow of the Temple Mount. It was minted in the final year before the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. And it says on it in Hebrew, for the redemption of Zion. So anyone coming and saying that Zionism is some new thing or some colonial movement is trying to deny the basic facts that the Jewish people are the native indigenous people of this land.
Going back to the United Nations.
Yes.
They're in charge of all the conflicts around the world, but for some reason they're like focused about what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and particularly against Israel. Why is that?
You know, the nature of anti-Semitism has always been that bashing the Jews allows people who have absolutely nothing in common to find common ground. And I think the same is true here. Attacking Israel at the United Nations gives countries that can otherwise agree on nothing common ground because they find a common enemy.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. The most UN countries are not democracies. Blaming Israel for being the source of everything that's wrong in the world is a much easier way to deflect responsibility for the problems of your own societies and your own countries. And that obsession is harming the quest for peace in the rest of the world.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Eylon.
Thank you.
We've heard from Eylon Levy, whose relentless pursuit for truth proves one powerful reality, that facts and courage are the strongest weapons that we have. But this isn't only his fight, it's yours as well. Every one of us can challenge false narratives, verify before sharing, and speak clearly and confidently in our own voices. Because today's battle isn't just about Gaza or Israel. It's a fight for the integrity of truth itself. Lies have consequences, real ones. They shape diplomacy, influence global elections and making of decisions, and affect millions of lives. But truth, when shared boldly and bravely, can change everything. So, verify, challenge, speak up. Our future, our security, our very identity as free and moral people depend on it. And most importantly, let's remember, guys, to pray for the peace of Israel, for the peace of all those innocent lives that are affected by these terrorist regimes in this region, in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and of course, in Israel and in Jerusalem. Let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is My State, a program about current events, my belief in God, and my journey in the Holy Land.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.